Hey, what's going on everybody? It's ETAPRIME back here again. Today we're going to be taking an early look at the upcoming TJD T101. Now this is a big screen handheld gaming console powered by a 7000 series Ryzen APU. And ever since this was announced, I've been wanting to get my hands on it, mainly because we've got a 10.1 inch display here. I mean, it's the biggest gaming handheld on the market right now. And before we get into it, I do want to mention that this is an earlier unit. This is one of their in-house testing prototypes. They were kind enough to send this over so we could take a look at it. The final product will be a little more refined when it comes to the overall aesthetic and the software, but this is fully functional and it actually works pretty great. Now, one of the beefiest handhelds on the market right now is the Steam Deck. I mean, when it comes to size, this thing is definitely a hoss, but as you can see, the T101 definitely comes in a lot bigger, and it is coming in heavier. I mean, obviously, we've got a much larger unit here. It's got a 10.1 inch 1200p display with a maximum brightness of 500 nits, and it's coming in with a weight of 1,080 grams, so almost 2.4 pounds, which is definitely a lot beefier than the Steam Deck. So this thing is a hoss. If you've got smaller hands, this one's definitely not for you. Just to put this into perspective for you, the Steam Deck is coming in with a weight of 669 grams. But again, with the T101, we've got a much larger display and a larger battery. Battery on this is coming in at 60 watt hours as opposed to 40 watt hours in the Steam Deck and the ROG Ally. Taking a look at the overall unit, we do have some RGB going on here. It is fully controllable from software. We've got Hall-based analog sticks and Hall-based linear triggers. Down here on the bottom in the lower left-hand corner, there's a 3.5mm audio jack and a micro SD card slot. And taking a look at the I/O up top, we've got a full-size USB 3 port and two USB Type-C ports. Now, one of these is USB 3.2, the other is USB 4, running at a 40 gig protocol, so connecting an eGPU is really simple. We've also got our volume rocker and our power/fingerprint sensor up top here. But when it comes to the buttons and the D-pad, it's using dome switches behind them. We don't have any conductive pads here with the buttons or the D-pad, so some people might not be into this. But the D-pad here functions much better than I thought it would. It also has some custom buttons, and over here on the left-hand side, we've got a Windows button, which will bring us home or open up the search bar at any time. Plus, we've got an on-screen keyboard button, so we can bring that up whenever we need it. And over on the right-hand side, we've got a home button, which is going to function as our Xbox button. Now, this should all be mappable from software later on, but right now that's how it's set up. Plus, there's a dedicated control center button, and with this, it's a proprietary software that will allow us to adjust the TDP, RGB, screen resolution, fan speed. We'll take a look at that in just a second, but I wanted to dive into the specs here because we've actually got a pretty beefy handheld. Now, when it comes to the APU they opted to use, there's actually two options, but the one I have here is the highest end version. We've got that AMD Ryzen 7 7840U. It's based on Zen 4, and we've seen this chip in a lot of handhelds recently. Base clock of 3.3 GHz with a boost up to 5.1. This will do up to 30 watts in the handheld, but that's with its own software. Using third-party software, you could take it up a bit higher than that if you wanted to. When it comes to the GPU, it's got that AMD Radeon 780M iGPU based on RDNA 3, 12 compute units, and this will run it up to 2700 MHz. 16 or 32 gigabytes of RAM, depending on the version you choose, but both of them are going to be using LPDDR5X running at 7500 megatransfers per second. We've got a huge 10.1 inch 1200p IPS display at 60 Hz with a maximum brightness of 500 nits, a 1 to 2 terabyte PCIe 4.0 M.2 NVMe SSD, Wi-Fi 6E, Bluetooth 5.2, Hall-based sticks and triggers, dual vibration motors, a 6-axis gyro, and a 60 watt-hour battery with 100 watt quick charging capabilities. Plus, we've got dual front-facing 2-watt stereo speakers here. So with the unit I have here, I'm running Windows 11. Taking a look at these special feature buttons, we've got our Windows button. This will bring us home or bring up our search bar. We've also got a on-screen keyboard button. And our home button, which at the time of making this video is actually acting as an Xbox button, so we can bring up the Microsoft game bar at any time. And finally, we've got our control center button. So the software I have is actually in Chinese, but I've got a good idea of what everything does here. Full control over the built-in RGB. We can change it any color we want. We can also change the brightness directly from the control center. We've got our TDP control. We've got a 4.8 watt for indie gaming, 6 watts and 15 watts, but we can go up to 30. It's a little bit of a different process right now because it's a very early unit. Fan control down here at the very bottom. and we can see what's going on at any given time with the hardware. So the way it looks right now, we've got TDP and fan control covered from within Windows, and I do want to mention this is a 32 gigabyte model, so we've got 32 gigabytes of RAM, and I've gone into the BIOS and dedicated 8 gigs of VRAM. You can leave this to auto if you wanted to, it's going to allocate what it needs, but I personally kind of like setting it up, and we've got plenty of RAM here with the 32 gigabyte model. So I've been messing around with these Hall-based analog triggers. They are linear, so we can just give it a little bit if we need to. Really great for racing games, launch control, drifting, things like that. And yeah, it does work really well the way it is right now. This is Forza Horizon 5, 1200p, medium settings, and I've got the TDP set at 15 watts. Everything we need to know is on screen in the top left-hand corner, and you can see that we are over 60 FPS. At 15 watts, we actually average 72 FPS with this game medium settings. And this is right on par with all of the other handhelds on the market with that 7840U, but we can take this up a bit more. So if we wanted to go to high settings, we need to up that wattage a bit. I find that 18 watts is a really nice sweet spot for this chip. But since we were running great at 15, I wanted to actually take it up a bit. We're at 28 watts. I'm now at high settings, 1200p with Forza Horizon 5, and we can average 86 FPS with this game. And it looks amazing on this 10.1 inch display. Now, unfortunately, we don't have a variable refresh rate display with this. It would have been really nice if this had FreeSync with this large screen, but it's a 60 Hz display, and of course, with third-party software, you can set it to 30, 35, 40, up to 60. The next thing I did was run some benchmarks on this handheld, and I am at a 28 watt TDP with these. First up, we've got Geekbench 6 single core 2312, multi 10,798. Falling right in line with the other 7840Us at this kind of wattage. Next up, we've got 3D Mark Night Raid 28,976. I also ran Fire Strike, and with this, we got a 7,614. And the final one here is Time Spy, and at 28 watts, we got a total score of 3,177. So we're right on par with those other handhelds at the same kind of wattage when it comes to these benchmarks. And in fact, we are beating out some of the other handhelds with the slower RAM. Remember, we've got 7,500 megatransfers per second RAM in here, as opposed to like 6,400 with some of the others on the market right now. Now it's time to jump back into some game testing, and here we have Grand Theft Auto 5, 1200p, normal, and we're at a 15 watt TDP. I find that this game absolutely loves these Zen 4 APUs. That iGPU is more than enough at 1080 or 1200p right here, normal settings. And at 15 watts, we got an average of 63 FPS. Of course, taking it up a bit more, like a nice little spot is 18 watts with this APU I found across the board with all the handhelds that I've tested. But I wanted to see what kind of battery life we could get at that 15 watt TDP. I really wanted this to kind of be pulling the same amount from that battery that the Steam Deck does. And at 15 watts, we're right there. Next up, we've got Mortal Kombat 1, and I'm sure we will see a little better performance down the road with this, with some optimizations. But I had to take it up to 28 watts to get what we have here, and we still can't run it at a constant 60. I'm going to chalk this up to bad optimizations right now. It's still pretty early for the game, and I've tested this on all of the 7840U handhelds and the Z1 Extremes. I just can't get a steady 60 no matter what kind of wattage I'm at with any of those handhelds right now. Moving over to the Horizon Zero Dawn built-in benchmark, and on screen I've got Afterburner in the top left-hand corner. We're at a 15 watt TDP, 1200p, medium settings, and you can see that our total battery draw, that's everything included here. Our speakers, our screen, the RGB, we're pulling around 27 watts from the battery. This is right there with the Steam Deck. You know, at full boat, the Steam Deck is pulling around 26 to 27, depending on what's going on. And having Afterburner display this can give us a good idea of what kind of battery life we can get out of this using some simple math. But with this benchmark here, medium settings, 1200p, 15 watts, we average 65 FPS. And the final game I wanted to test, at least for this video, was Cyberpunk 2077. So we're at 1200p low, 28 watt TDP. With this game here, going to 1200p over 60, you need a lot of wattage with this 7840U, but this system is more than capable of running this over 60 at 15 watts. Only difference is you have to drop it down to 800p or 720 depending on your screen's aspect ratio. But at 1200p low, 28 watts, we can get an average of around 74 FPS, and at 15 watts, 800p low, we get an average of around 66. So not bad at all, and yeah, you can get some decent battery life while playing this game, you just have to take that resolution down. And speaking of battery life, through all of my testing, I've been keeping an eye on total power draw from that battery at different wattages. We've got a 60 watt hour battery, and I had my screen brightness at 100% for everything that I tested here. At a 10 watt TDP, we're pulling around 14 watts in total from the battery. Estimated 240 minutes, so around 4 hours of runtime at 10 watts. 15 watts, pulling 27 from the battery, 133 minutes. And finally, a 28 watt TDP. This does pull quite a bit from the battery, jumping up to 43 watts. Looks like we could net around 83 minutes of runtime out of this with that 60 watt hour battery. Now keep in mind, these are estimates based on what we know here, just using some simple math. I'm sure these numbers will be a bit lower, but it's looking pretty good given that we have such a large battery here. At the time of making this video, I've spent 4 days with the T101, and performance is great. I mean, we can take that TDP up on the 7840U, we've got a huge battery, big screen. It would be nice to have FreeSync here, at least some type of, variable refresh rate. But unfortunately, we've just got a 60 Hz panel. Now, the main thing about this is it is huge. It is the biggest handheld on the market right now. It's definitely coming in as the heaviest. So if you've got smaller hands, this one definitely isn't for you. But what we've got so far has worked out pretty good. Definitely need to work on their software a little bit. I'd love to see some more TDP adjustment directly from the control center they have. Another thing I'd love to see there is just button calibration, maybe analog stick calibration. But it's really not that bad. It's just a really big handheld. It's performing on par with the other 7840U handhelds on the market right now. And you can get some really great battery life out of this at those lower TDPs. So playing indie games, you can get around 4 hours of battery life out of this at 10 watts, which is amazing. But that's going to wrap it up for this first look video. I'm going to keep an eye out for software updates and things like that. And if anything major happens before this officially launches, I will make another video. But it's up on Indiegogo, and they've got an official website. I'll leave links to both down below. And if there's anything else you want to see running on the T101, let me know. But that's it for this one. And like always, thanks for watching.